Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tosin Kembi. Labisi, can you hear me? Okay. Ola, can you hear me?
I hear you back in.
Please go on, Tosin, I can hear.
All right, thank you. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome you to the 12th. Welcome you to the 12th webinar series, Think the Future of Work, Understanding Millennials and Generation Z in the Workplace. The webinar session is brought to you by DCSL Corporate Services Limited in continuation of its webinar series. And to lead the discourse this evening, we have distinguished subject matter experts. We have Funke Amobi, we have Wale Adeniro, and Kemi Shonubi. Without further ado, we urge participants to please leave their comments and contributions in the chat box and questions in the Q&A box. And please mute your audio to avoid background noise and interference for a smooth and worthwhile session. So very quickly, I would introduce our moderator for today, who would introduce the panelists, and I would hand over the proceedings to her. The moderator for this event is Kemi Shonubi. She's a licensed human resource executive with multi-sectorial experience and a deep expertise in people management, organizational development, and strategic planning. She's currently the director of people culture, experience, and operations at TVC Communications, where she works to create an environment that positions employees to reach their fullest potential. Kemi is an associate member of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management of Nigeria, the Society for Human Resource Management, as well as the Nigerian Institute of Training and Development. She's an alumna of the prestigious Cornell University, New York, with an advanced postgraduate certificate in strategic HR management, and holds an MBA and Bachelor of Science degrees in Human Resource Management and Accounting, respectively, from Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria. So join me as I welcome Kemi Shonubi, who are moderator for this event. Hello, Kemi.
Hello, Tosin. Good afternoon. How are you? Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope everyone can hear me. So I'll give us a little background into what our topic for today is and the people that will join me in dissecting the topic. It's called The Future of Work, Understanding Millennials and Generation Z in the Workplace. A little background. So Millennials and Generation Z are the future of any forward-looking organization, as they have a deep understanding of how technology can transform the way we work and live, and a fresh outlook on the world. This generation are digital natives and have been making excellent advancements using technology in and outside the workplace. Millennials and Generation Z are bringing to the workplace attitudes shaped by digital revolution. This means they have a different outlook to the generations before them. That's what they say. And far lower acceptance levels for the status quo. All these present challenges and opportunities to the future of the workplace. It is therefore important to understand this young generation and embrace the advancement they bring to the workplace. Therefore, the aim of this webinar is to discuss major issues around the future of work and the role of millennials and Generation Z, as we intend for attendees to derive value for their participation. So attendees, you also be given opportunities to ask questions using the relevant icons on the platform that Tosin had mentioned before. So with me today are they're my egbons in the industry, and I'm sure the team will write up or show us their profiles while I run through the profiles. So I have I call them, I've given them short codes for these sessions so that we don't have long name callings. One is Wale Adediran, my Egbon, and Funke Amobi, while I wait for the team to provide me with their profile so that I can read that out to the team. Okay, so Funke Amobi is the country head human capital for Stanbic IBTC Holdings, a member of the Standard Bank Group. I've been hearing her name for a while, so I'm happy to connect with her here today in person. She holds a first degree in economics from the University of Lagos, Nigeria, where she graduated with a second-class honors upper division. She has over 25 years experience, a bachelor's degree in economics, and MBA and specialist certifications in organizational development and talent and career management. Can you see that is a very beautiful profile? So let me jump to the last part. A chartered fellow of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Development, CIPD. I saw her picture one time collecting awards. Awesome woman, United Kingdom. Funke was recently awarded the Chartered Companion status, the highest recognition in the world of human resource and people development by the CIPD UK. She's also a member of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management in Nigeria and the Society of Human Resource Management in USA, where she served as a subject matter expert in developing the body of knowledge for specific HR certifications. Welcome on board, FA. Thank you very much. So my second Egbon in the house, please pull up the profile. Thank you very much. Okay, so Wale Adediran is the Group Human Resource Director for Flour Mills of Nigeria PLC and its subsidiaries. He's also the President and Chairman of Governing Council of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management of Nigeria, CIPM. He holds BSc Honors 1990 and MSc 1992, both in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Ibadan, and started his career at Procter & Gamble in 1992. My hands are up. As a management trainee, he was promoted Group Manager, Human Resources, leading Procter & Gamble HR in West Africa sub-region. I go to the last paragraph. He had been a regular speaker at conferences and lectures within and outside Nigeria. He chairs the National Joint Industrial Council, NJIC, and the Committee of Personnel Experts of the Association of Food, Beverages, and Tobacco Employers. He had been on the board of United Way Nigeria and the board of trustees of Guinness Foundation. He's also a fellow of the Nigerian Institution of Mechanical Engineers, a division of the Nigerian Society of Engineers, and a member of the Nigerian Society of Engineers. Thank you very much for having, I'm going to call them FA and WA for this session. Please, so thank you. This is me clapping. Okay. All right. So with the background that I've given initially into our topic of today, you know, a lot of times we just hear millennials, Gen Z. In fact, Gen Z is more recent. So for us to delve into today's topic, we've tried to break the questions into 4 categories. So the first angle or first category will be, you know, what is the introduction and, you know, differentiation of the generations in the workplace? So my first question will go to FA. Kindly give us a background into the different generations in the workplace. You know, we used to hear baby boomers when we are reading books, Generation X, you know, millennials, and Generation Z, and their own views around work. So the questions are, oh, before I go into my questions, apologies. We actually have a poll. So let me hold off on the questions. So we have a poll that's going to be deployed by the support team with few questions that we would like to ask the attendees of this session. So the poll, you all can see the poll now, it's been deployed. It will take about a minute or 2 for everyone to respond to the poll. So So if you can all hear me, attendees, please attempt or answer the 5 questions that have been presented here in the poll. It's very important that we get your insights into these questions. So basically the first one is saying, what is the current percentage of millennials and Generation Zs in your organization? In your opinion, will it be beneficial? This, I'm quite curious to know what the answer to this, from our attendees will be. In your opinion, will it be beneficial and advantageous for organizations to have a higher percentage of millennials and Generation Z? Or should we keep it at the baby boomers? Okay, answers are coming in. Yes, okay. So I'm seeing from my end, in terms of, what's the current percentage, it seems a lot of us have above 50%, okay, it's moving, less than 80% of millennials and Generation Z in our organization, but it's changing. Okay. Which of the following, in your view, qualifies as reasons to engage millennials and Generation Z at the workplace? Some people say all of the above, which is creative outlook, technological expertise, quick learning ability. Okay. I guess we're rounding up on favorite. It says, do you think millennials / Generation Z should be considered for managerial and senior executive roles? So yes, with some reservation. Okay. Seems that has the highest responses so far. Okay. The support team, please confirm if we're rounding up with our poll so that we can delve into the questions. Okay, so the results, we're going to share the results shortly, so we all can see how we've, the tilt of our attendees, what it looks like, how everyone seems to have voted or, well, pick the answer. It's on the screen already. Okay, so I guess we all can see the poll results. It seems that we have, most of the persons here have more Generation Z and millennials in their organization, if my count is right. I don't know if that's yet, it's right. And in your opinion, will it be beneficial and advantageous for organizations to have a higher percentage of millennials and Generation Z? They said yes, more people say yes, okay. So baby boomers in the house, baby boomers, yes. Third question says, which of the following, your views, qualifies as reasons to engage millennials and Generation Z at the workplace? And the poll results indicate all of the above. Okay, interesting. Which of the following do you think? So basically we're thinking that quick learning ability, entrepreneurial and innovative tendencies, all of that is important. Which of the following do you think is a must-have for a millennial or Generation Z in a workplace? Flexibility and remote work seems to have the highest. And the last question is, do you think millennials, Generation Z should be considered for managerial and senior executive roles? It seems we have a tie there. Yes, with some reservation, yes, without any reservation. Okay, so I think we can agree to go. Okay, can you all hear me? Yes. Okay, so I guess we can go into the question segment based off on the results from the poll. So like I mentioned, can you hear me, Effie? Yeah?
Yes, I can.
Okay, fantastic. So like I mentioned, our questions are broken into 4 categories. So we'll go into the first category. When we say millennials and Gen Z, are they one and the same? Are there differences? So the first question is, can you give us some background into, you know, the generations, the different generations currently in the workplace? You have the baby boomers, the Gen X, millennials, and Generation Z, and their views around work, as it were. Let's go, please. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kemi, and good evening, esteemed viewers. Now, to be very exact, there are like 5 generations in today's, well, averagely across industry, you would find multiple generations, I'd like to say, because, you know, you're very, very unlikely to find the 5 generations in an organization. So there's the traditionalists, which we also call the silent generation. There is the baby boomers, there's the Generation X, millennials, and the Gen Z. So I'm going to tell you, I mean, specifically who they are and how to identify them. Most importantly, they're stratified based on their age. So it's an age-driven generational, you know, identification. So the generation, when you talk about the traditionalists, you know, and the traditionalists are the silence generation, they're the one that, you know, they were born before 1946, you know, which is why I said, you know, you're unlikely to find all of them, you know, in one workplace. Born before 1946, the traditionalists. So let's start with the baby boomers. They're really the ones that, you know, between 1946 and 1964, you're still likely to find, you know, them all around. You know, baby boomers, once upon a time, you know, they were, in their generation, there was a lot more affluence, you know, around, you know, industry, around the society. So they had a lot more stability growing up. So we're talking about people who, whilst today they're at work, they're aged between like 54, you know, they're about between to 72, the late retirees. And, you know, their biggest aspiration is job security at work. They're looking for that stable place. They're going to retire. They're talking about their retirement life and what it's going to look like. They've got very strong work ethics. They're loyal to the core. They usually would have one employer, one career, and career life starts and ends. Strong workforce ethics, you know, dimensionally focused on start, life cycle, end, one career, typically. Now, sometimes you find some people are in another generation, but their work ethics or their work preferences and work values feel like another generation. So be very mindful of that. Generation X, on the other hand, 1965 to 1979, they're about between 39 and 53. And you will say, and again, technology is an important part of what identifying who they are and really what sort of defines their point of differences. So the baby boomers I talked about earlier, they're like those people, we call them digital acquirers, you know. So in their days is when, you know, those funny looking television sets and cassette radio, cassette player and all of that. So they acquire technology, you know. So that defines the kind of stability and security they're looking for. Generation X, you know, they are digital immigrants. In their own time, the IBMs of this world began to emerge, video, you know, recorders began to emerge. You could talk about VCRs, you know, and stuff like that. So really, they are a lot more individually focused. So they come to the workplace with their own, you know, I've come to become the next CEO, to become the next marketing director. So they've got their individual focus. Yeah, they're also, you know, if you like, they're also targeted, you know, individuals. They know exactly what they want. I'm a salesperson. I'm a lawyer. I just want to become the chief judge of the federation. Then you go to the millennials, 1980 to 1994. You see, I'm smiling. It's already getting exciting. You know, they are, while the Generation X are looking for work-life balance, I just want to, you know, again, they have the increasingly female diversity in the workforce began in the age of the baby boomers, of Generation X. So you find that there's a lot more demand for work-life balance, you know, just put me in a place where I can find work-life balance. Millennials, enter millennials, age 24 to 38, 1980 to 1994. Guess what? Freedom, flexibility, because indeed they are the digital natives. They are the their iconic technology is all about internet. You know, they were born in the age of the internet. What does that mean? They have a strong sense of entitlement, freedom, flexibility, you know, work-life balance, yes, but stressless, you know, give us good EVP, good employee value proposition, and ensure that I can enjoy all that. I'm a digital native anyway, so technology is a big part of my appreciating an environment that enables me deliver my best. Then Gen Z, finally, 1995 into date, into 2009 thereabout. So they're typically about, 23 years old, and they are the people who were born during the global financial crisis, Obama regime, So you can imagine they are they're not digital natives, they are technoholics. So they are, when you say someone is a workaholic, they are technoholics. They bounce on technology. That's all that, they're about. They bounce on technology. They are digital crazy, not digital savvy. They multitask in the speed of technology. So they've got 7 devices running all around them, and they're different tasks and activities on the different devices. So of course they value security as well, they value stability, but they value fluidity. They want things to run. They're the social media world, they are the hashtag world. So that's the, if you like, core differences. And I could go on and on and on and tell you what each one of them, value in an employer. But I think we'll get to that as the session goes on.
Oh, fantastic, Effie. Thank you so much for starting that. Now you see there are 5. So you start from the silent generation, the baby boomers, the Gen X, and then to the guys that we're talking about, millennials, who are also called Gen Y, and the Gen Z. I remember also seeing something about the millennials being called multitaskers, and then the Gen Z being ambitious. There's a lot of digital native conversation amongst both of them. Okay, so next question is for WA. He says, I should call him while I say WA for this session. Are there any significant differences between the generation Z and millennials? Because sometimes I see that we use them interchangeably in the workplace. Sometimes people just all call millennials. What are the distinct significant differences, if there are? And what are the distinguishing traits, strengths, and weaknesses of either of both generations? Okay.
Thank you very much, Kemi. In fact, before I like the significant difference between Gen Y and Z. Let me say already we have Gen A in the workplace. That's the generation Alpha, the children of our Gen Y. They, from 2011 to date, you're already talking about, so you're looking at 1996 to 2010 or 2011 thereabout. And then you have these young kids, 7-year-old, 8-year-old, who are owners of businesses already. They are techpreneurs. We have young kids that have made their first millions from the digital space. So our understanding of the workforce and the creation of adult software before you enter into the workforce is easily giving way now. It started in the entertainment industry with technology. Now with digital technology, now you have digital entrepreneurs that are underage. So the Gen Alpha is already in the space. And like F.A. mentioned earlier, the silent generation that had either looked like they were facing off. Right now, the legal requirements around labor is changing rapidly. And you have some industries now, especially the judicial and educational sectors, where you have people that are in that age group that are still retained. So retirement age in the legal profession or at the bench, when you look at the judiciary, retirement age in the academia, when you look at professors, is stretching the limits. And already you are having extension of even at the retirement, some of them still come back on contract. Anyway, that's to say we are in a complex world, not just I, but we can have 6 sections being in the workspace at the same time as we speak. Now for Y and Z, they are close, and that's why it's always challenging sometimes to differentiate. But the significant difference is Gen Z has come to amplify what we know with Gen Y. I give you an example. The millennials are collaborative. They're not like my generation that's competitive. In my generation, it's, you want to be the notable superstar in the group. But in their own case, and sorry, I will make reference to HENSAS. That's why they told you there was no leader. They collaborate. So the partnership that you can. So for Gen Z, it's more than collaboration, it's globalization. So there are boundaries. And they see the human, all the problems of racial challenges that started with the silent generation and continue with with baby boomers and Gen X will phase out with the new generation that's coming into the workplace now, because they see things beyond. They are practical. That's Gen Z. They amplify the tech savvy to digital nativity. They amplify the focus of Gen Y on greater good to looking at the world as a global village. So for Gen Z, you can refer to them as the amplified version of Gen Y, the millennial. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. One key thing that you said that I found very interesting was you said Gen Z has come to amplify what we already know with Gen Y. And that may be one of the reasons why a lot of people just generalize and say millennials. For a long time, I know that in the workplace, you just hear those millennials, those young people. I know somebody yesterday was referring to people as children, and he got a lot of backlash yesterday on social media, but let's not go into that. So the next question leads off on what you just said, and it's for FA to respond. What are your thoughts on why generations behave differently, and have different notions about work ethic? I know you touched on some of it in your initial response to the first question, but maybe we should speak, now to the Gen Z and the Gen Y. Why do they behave differently? Is it upbringing? Is it, you alluded to something? Let me not give all the answers, but why do generations behave differently? Effie, can you help us, please?
Thanks very much, Kemi. So firstly, this subject of generational differentiation and appreciation is something that really gives me a lot of excitement. And that's the reason it excites me is because of the question you've just asked. So why are we where we are, that there is a point of difference? I think it's down to two things. One, there's a difference in their social markers and their environmental externalities. So firstly, before I get to the social markers, firstly, on the subject of evolution of work, just look at how life in general has evolved. And if we narrow it down to, because we want to know why their nuances are different and their work ethics are different, the work has evolved. Work in itself, what we do, how we do it, where we do it, has evolved over time, which is why you're having this conversation on the corridors of the future of work. So we say that the future of work is a conversation of the evolution of work. Work has evolved over 4 evolutions. And now we talk about industrial 4.0. We talk about market, industry 4.0. I take the position that we're actually in industry 5.0, and I'll explain already. And the generation sort of overlay the various industries. So in Industrial Revolution 1.0, again, it goes back to the age. Once upon a time, before 17th century, what was the order of the day? It was automation, mechanization, and then we moved on to second industrial revolution. At that time, electricity, something had happened differently. So the way you work and what you do and the people doing the work has changed. So the nuances of their expectation of work ethics, certainly the social markers, societal markers, aspirations will have to change in line with the evolution. Come third, internet age. Once we moved into the internet age, it was automation. Everything could be automated, so we could mass produce. And third, Industry 3.0. Now we're in Industry 4.0, occasioned by the digital revolution, the rapid advancement in technology and artificial intelligence and all of that. Now that means that there's a differentiation in the social markers and the social environment that in which this new age is required to thrive. So their social markers begin to change. And if you look around, again, the externalities in the, marking this generational birth, the birth of a new generation, you immediately see that there's something that definitely must influence their work ethics. So it's one, the evolution of work, is two, social markers. When people are born in, when the Berlin Wall broke, there's a nuance that sparks off in that generation. When people are born in the new millennium, 9/11, there's a social marker, that is a critical social marker that sparks off their expectation and what works for them and what doesn't work. When people are born in the global financial crisis, then they definitely have to become entrepreneurial in their nuance about how work is done. So I think it's a lot driven by the social markers marking the generations, and secondly, the evolution of work and how work itself has presented itself.
Oh, wow. Oh, beautiful. I heard social markers and social environment, and those are the two things that sort of differentiate, the way these different generations work in the workplace. You ran us through evolution, internet age, Industry 3.0, Industry 4.0, and you say, according to you, you feel that we're actually in Industry 5.0 with all the changes that have happened. Okay. So when the second phase, you remember that I mentioned that there were 4 categories that we broke our questions into. And the second phase of the questions will now be under millennials and the Gen Z in the workplace and future of work. I remember that, at the beginning of this year, when we got into 2020, there was a lot of talk around future of work. The future of work is here. COVID came in, and then we're like, the future of work that we've been talking about in the past 2-3 years has arrived. So my next question goes to WA. Are there any advantages that millennials and Gen Z actually bring to the workplace and the future of work? Are there clear advantages that these category of people that we're talking about today bring into the workplace?
Thank you very much. These 2 categories of workers that we're referring to, of workforce that we're referring to, are the ones we describe as being tech savvy and being digital natives. Okay? They are fluent when it comes to digital technology. So, can you imagine our workplaces today without those 2 qualities? What would it have been? Would there even be a workplace to start with? So I think the answer to that question is so obvious. What we're doing right now wouldn't have been possible if we do not have those, inputs coming to play. We're able to have this webinar because we have that generation. Imagine if we don't, then how would we have survived COVID? How would we have survived the disruptions that we've experienced? In actual fact, it's a key differentiator for any organization that will have a future. So it's the key to innovation. It's the key to being future ready and being future proof. So the huge advantage they bring to the workplace and to the competitiveness of any business is found in the optimization of resources, in the availability, in ensuring availability of resources when physical distance becomes a major factor. And when you have crises like we do now, it's only those organizations that have this group of workforce that would be at the forefront of other competitors. So they bring a huge advantage in helping us to understand what they know very well. Oftentimes I get stuck, and it's my son that puts me through. I think with my engineering background and all I do, I develop apps, I develop macros, but even then, there is ability and there is ability. I don't know the English word for that. Thank you very much.
Ability and ability, it was born inside you. Let me help you. and it's fantastic that you use the example of Zoom. I can tell you, I was asking someone that I could just imagine being hit with this pandemic now, and how would businesses have coped? How would a lot of all the conversations that we've been able to have, even this session, how would we have been able to effectively deploy this type of training? It would have been different for all of us. So I remember with what you said, I remember one time, a few years back, there's this tool called Workplace by Facebook. And basically it's a tool used for people in the office to share pictures and all of that. And I remember then some younger team members came to meet me and they said, "Ma, we want to deploy this thing." I didn't understand it because I'm like, Facebook is meant to be for your private place. Why will you bring Facebook to the work? It took a lot of convincing, but after I budged, I realized that that is where we are going to now, where you need more collaboration, more collaborative teams and all of that. And that takes me to my next question, which is for Effie. Do you think that these classes of individuals are effectively engaged, in the Nigerian workforce today? Now we're bringing it home. Do you think that we're effectively engaging this Generation Y and Generation Z effectively in the Nigerian workplace? Effie.
Thanks very much, Kemi. Before I answer that question, let me tell you Generation 5.0. Let me tell you about the Industry 5.0 I touched on. So for me, Industry 5.0 is triggered by externalities that are beyond, immediate resolution, i.e. COVID-19. Okay, so for the first time, we're all shut down. So it's no longer technology. Is occasioned by an externality that a societal marker that is like a pandemic. So when a pandemic comes, in my view, it triggers a revolution. It triggers another industrial revolution. I've got my son is 8. So my 8-year-old son has been schooling from home since March. Yeah, talk about Industry 5.0. And as I speak, he's in another room where he has 2 laptops, and I mean 2 laptops. He's got one laptop for normal stuff, play stuff that had started going off. Then we bought a new one for school. Yeah. And now he's on school. I'm on Microsoft Teams, he's on Microsoft Teams. I'm on Zoom, he's on Zoom. He has his email account. We have to open an email account for him, blah, 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 and all of that. And he'll tell you, I'm chimnedum@gmail, send it to my email, I'll pick it up. And he's sitting down. I walk in one day, he has the 2 laptops on. Teacher was on the other one. I'm like, why do you have 2? And he said, I need 2 devices. I'm quoting him. I need 2 devices. I'm on voice here and I'm on visual here. So I'm cool, Mom, don't worry. And he goes on. Why? He said the voice here wasn't working, but I have other applications here I need for my assignment. And I'm on voice. I'm talking about a boy that will be 8 in December. Welcome Industry 5.0. I kid you not. When we were to get started, Zoom, he was supposed to go on Zoom for his lessons. And that day I was very tired. And I said, you know what, I'll come and do it for you. I'll come and do it. I kept saying, I'll come and do it for you. I'll download Zoom. And I didn't do it. My son came into the room and said, Mom, I've downloaded Zoom. I said, what do you mean? He said, I went onto Google. I went there, I ran there immediately, only to find that, yes, he had downloaded Zoom. He said, how did you do it? I went onto Google. You said, download Zoom. How do I download stuff? I go to Google. I asked Google. I said, download Zoom. I said, 3 different Zooms came out. I saw Zoom Intune, Zoom this, Zoom. You only said Zoom. So I picked on this and I downloaded this. Now I need to know what to do, Mommy. It's time for my class. That's when I realized I needed a Gmail account. Okay, we now need to do I'm talking about a 7.5-year-old boy going to be 8 in, listen, welcome Industry 5.0, triggered by those externalities that cause the social marker is an externality that is beyond everyone's control. So it will trigger a different work ethics, a different workflow, and completely different. So at the end of the day, he's not a technocrat now. He's going to have to be an advanced technocrat. If at this age, he's dealing with systems on this note, he finds things online by himself. So when you ask the question, are we actively engaging all generations into this workforce? I will say to you, at very best, we are on a journey. Organizations that are at the other edge of it are organizations who continuously refresh the meaning of employee engagement. What are their engagement drivers? And they identify new engagement drivers that are generationally driven. So what are your engagement drivers? How do you measure them? And what do you do to improve those engagement drivers? That is when you are optimizing all the generation. So if you're still using, once upon a time when we started doing engagement drivers in my early days in HR, it was Gallup 12 questions. Those are the engagement drivers. Job security, what is it measuring? Job security, this, that, remuneration. Now you need to define your engagement drivers along the nuances of the different generations. So what are the things that matter to this generation? Flexibility, entrepreneurial. You have to ask the questions. Can you bring the best version of yourself to work? And when they tell you no, then you start figuring out what are the different ways to make them bring their entrepreneurial self, independent self, pragmatic self, social activist self to the workplace. So the answer is not yes or no. I think that most organizations are on a journey. I think some organizations are still in denial, sadly. In my workforce, Stanbic IBTC, 80% of my workforce is millennial and Gen Z. What does that mean to me? I better accelerate my readiness to engage them. Set up innovation hubs, set up innovation teams. If you don't define your employee engagement drivers in a way that is generationally savvy. So the drivers of engagement for Gen Z, millennial generation Y, is already actively represented in the way you design your productivity and engagement plan. That's the only way you can engage all your generations. If you're still focused only on the work aspirations and all of that, job security, and that's all you're measuring, you cannot engage all of this multiple workforces at work. So I think we're on a journey. We're in different categories. Some organizations are in arrogant denial. They just feel, look, that's a conversation for somebody else. You're not talking to us. Some are already embracing the point of difference, and they have reshaped their engagement drivers accordingly. So they are coming up with initiatives and it enables, these different generations, millennials and Generation Z, find the full expression of themselves. We had a board meeting last week, and my CEO was debriefing me after that. I wasn't in the full board. Was debriefing me and saying to me that we have a team of, we call it the ideas team, and they came up with a new product. And to take that new product to the board for an approval, he made a millennial, I'm sure it's even a Gen Z, he made a Gen Z do that presentation to the board. When he said that to me, I said, what did you do? Who presented? He said, excellence, I think, endurance presented it. Usually, traditionally, you hand it over to the senior person. But these young ones were the ones in the team. The product is for their age. So he said to me, it makes sense for the board to hear it from the millennial. They heard it and he got a board approval. I stood up to say, oh my God. Now we're at the point where you send your Gen Z to go make your board presentations and get your board approvals, including your budget requirements and budget prayers. So for me, it is when you change your engagement drivers to be generationally savvy and generationally friendly that you can optimize and absolutely engage these multiple generations in today's workplace.
Wow, I'm trying to keep up with, in fact, I was scribbling and writing. It's not only me, I'm also learning in this process. I heard this generationally savvy. So you're building your engagement drivers. You're not just doing or monitoring employee engagement for the fun of it. Traditionally, the way we always say, oh, how do you measure engagement? You're building it around your generation. You're building the kind of questions, you're building the kind of the insights you are gaining is specifically for even the generation mix that you have. I remember I was talking to my team the other day, and we're talking about demographics when we're reporting on demographics. You need to know the demographics in your business. You need to know what makes up the fabric of your business so that you know what engages each one of them at different times. So let me skip to the next category. I think this is important, right? And we're going to talk about how organizations can position themselves, because you mentioned, that you need to wake up as an organization. You need to decide how you want to utilize the resources you have to the best of their ability. So the question goes back to you, Effie.
Hi, Kemi. Hello. Hi, Kemi. Hello, IT. Can you still hear me? Or is it Kemi or myself?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can hear you.
Okay, so I think Kemi
drop on her. She'll be back.
Okay, right.
She's back.
I'm back. Apologies, it seems I keep getting bumped off by our wonderful network.
Yeah.
So the question I was asking was for FA. I was asking about, we talk about diversity now in the workplace, everybody talking and raving about diversity. So diversity in the workplace, we know it's an essential tool. Is there an ideal balance that an organization should aim for while hiring across the various generations? So we've established we have about 5 to 6 or even 7 generations. Is there a certain number we should focus on bringing on board? Is there a balance? Is it ratio? What should we be looking at for when hiring, for example?
Thanks very much, Kemi. Now, again, there are no right or wrong answers. This is where the consultant tells you it depends. Now, diversity is important, and you must aim to have a diverse workforce, because diversity really is directly proportional to business continuity. When we talk about succession planning and succession management, what we're trying to say is really ensure that all your generations are managed together. Because when you talk about succession management, all you're saying is, the old will grow, the young shall grow, and the old will go. I'm choosing my words. The young shall grow and the old will go. So when the old go, recall I didn't say the old will die. The old will go and the young shall grow. That's succession management. So figure out when A is going, B or C or D should be ready to grow into that role. So succession management alone already speaks to, which is the heart of business continuity management, already speaks to the subject of why you must have diversity. There must always be a diverse workforce. No, anyway, that age is just one factor of measuring diversity. There's several other diversity indicators, including gender, including religion, and all of that you must be mindful of. But let's stay on age. Now, the reason why you must ensure that you have a diverse workforce is that essentially that's what feeds your other key HR processes like succession management and co. But how do you get that into place? You must have recruitment platforms that enable you attract directly in the various generational pipes. So I keep saying to organizations, you must have, once upon a time, we had management training programs, graduate training programs. Those are entry-level training programs that typically aim to attract millennials and Gen Z. And that's organizations would usually, we have a graduate training program that is deliberately tailored to attracting millennials and Gen Z. So firstly, you must map whatever your desire for diversity is, or your target or your actual your target or your goal for diversity. You must map it with appropriate recruitment platforms and strategies that enable you feed that goal or achieve that goal. So yes, diversity is essential because it is directly proportional or directly fitting into your business continuity plans and succession management agenda, succession planning and management agenda. And at the end of the day, if you look at specific targets, some industries have specific ratios because of the kind of jobs, because of their mix of jobs, frontline jobs, and jobs where, and technology jobs, digital savvy jobs where indeed you know that generationally you would typically staff them with millennials and Gen Zs to get the best of them. So where you have the industries like in a technology industry, you find that the mix of their millennials and Gen Z vis-a-vis baby boomers and Generation X would be completely different from any financial services industry. We are digital in our nuance and in our frame. When I tell you I have 80%, millennials and Gen Z, you tell you that Funke Amobi is in the 20%, the old that will go, and then the young will grow. So the nature of the industry sometimes defines what they target or what the optimal mix should be. It doesn't have a right or wrong answers. Some regulators have gone further to sort of attempt to influence the mix and define, in not too clear terms, define what they expect your diversity mix to look like by saying that, they expect you to have X percentage of people above the certain age in this category. So where the industry has defined it, that's what it is. Where the regulators has defined it, that's what it is. But mostly it depends on how reliant, for example, the industry is on technology and all of that, that will determine what their optimal mix would be. To get the job done in an environment where digital is the answer, you need the digital natives, you need the technoholics. So if you look at your mix and you have 80-20, Gen X 80, and millennials 20%, I know that there's something wrong with that organization. I know you won't be the leader in your industry, because certainly the people who have what it takes to deliver the job and keep you ahead of competition are not in the room. So diversity mix is absolutely essential, mandatory. Every organization must define what they must figure out what their ideal mix should be. They must put in place structures, recruitment platforms and structures to enable them feed that goal. Otherwise, you can set a goal, but you'll never be able to achieve that goal because you don't have the infrastructure in place to deliver on your intended mix.
Beautiful, beautiful. Map your target for diversity. And one of the things you first said was, it depends. And it's depending on many other factors. The young shall grow and the old would go. Oh, gal, oh, gal, oh, gal. All right. They have to go. Okay, so we started off, I remember WA, this question will be for you. You mentioned a typical advantage of having the millennials and Gen Z in the workspace, where you mentioned even using the Zoom platform was one of the key things that we have sort of benefited from, the younger generation in the workplace. Now, in light of the immense benefits that having the millennials and Gen Z on the team, have, what should organizations do differently to attract, engage, and retain them in the workforce? Can WA hear me?
Yes, I heard you loud and clear.
So what can we do? What can we as organizations who must, young shall grow and the old will go at the end of the day? What can we do to retain, to attract, retain, and engage them? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me start by saying, mentioned some initiatives that forward-looking organizations are introduced to attract the Gen Y and Gen Z, especially the long-tested and proven graduate trainee or internship schemes. Now, let me talk about it in this Gen and Z we're talking about. Do not share the characteristics of Gen boomers. Able by the process. I got bounced off. I believe you can hear me.
So
now.
It seems I think we can hear you now.
Right.
You were not clear for a bit, but maybe we should take it up again.
All right, so I was saying that Gen Y and Gen Z do not share the characteristic of the baby boom Gen X that seek loyalty in their employers. They seek employers that will give them a career, a long-term career and pension and retirement. This is a generation of career and retirement for tons of duty. For tons of duty. What does that mean? They will have meaningful jobs that are broken into projects. So they will see the outcome and impact that they are making from time to time. And we can't give them such a challenge anymore. They will and provide them. So they want flexibility.
Okay, so it seems that we're having some audio issues from WA's end, and I'll see how soon he can join back. Basically, what we were asking were questions around, what are the benefits that these two category of personnel bring. We've identified the benefits rather. So how can organizations attract them? How can organizations engage and of course retain them? And I guess we've mentioned a couple of those things when we're talking earlier, where we're saying the first thing is even identifying the differences in all of the generations you have in your workforce. Can everybody hear me? Okay. WA, are you back? I was holding the fort for you. Yes, I was trying to hold the fort for you. Your line is it's buzzing. It's buzzing. It's like a flying. I can hear you, but your line, the audio keeps echoing. It's echoing. Okay, let's try again. Okay.
It's unbelievable.
That's what network does to us. Okay, so go ahead.
Let me try again.
Yes.
Gen Y, Gen Z, they are not like baby boomers and Gen X that look for retirement and long career in one place. So to attract them, we need to give opportunities for what is called tours of duty. And see the tangible results they have achieved. Okay. Secondly, they are practical. So they are not looking for most of the parenting or grandparenting incentives that we provide to the older generations, or all those things we call golden handcuffs and so on and so forth. Are more interested in what their employers represent, in the good that their employers do. Remember, I mentioned earlier on that where the baby boomers were domineering and our own generation, Gen X, was competitive, the Gen Y are collaborative. The Gen Zers are looking at globalization. They are looking at doing good. They are looking at greater good. They want the employer to represent something good that they can identify. And there's nothing you can do about keeping them for 20-year career, 30 years career. Delivery in cycle times of 3 to 5 years maximum. In fact, for some of them, they would tell you, once I have done 2-3 years, I'm done. If you don't have anything else for me, I will go. So this is a generation that, yes, they seek stability, but flexibility is also very important to them. And that includes changing the flavor of the challenge that you give to them frequently. They are not going to sit in one row for forever. So for you to attract them, you must have an environment that provides that kind of flexibility. For you to retain them, it's a huge challenge. And especially for manufacturing organizations, you know, we have a peculiar challenge. It takes time to develop an engineer. It's not something you can do overnight. It's not like you go on Google and ask Google how to mill flour. Even if you ask Google, it will take you time to understand what Google is talking about. But you can still break their career into small chunks of projects that will make it meaningful to them. Also, you're going to conquer what it means to temper wheat. And that is something that will take you 3 months learning. You will be in Switzerland for 2 weeks. And when you come back, we'll attach you to this particular project. Give them opportunities to lead projects, like the example FA provided, where they can present to senior management. They love mentoring, so they want to be attached and connected to senior management. Unlike our generation, where we will do mini, mini, many more, and the sign of the cross before we enter into the office of our head of department. We want to walk into the office of the group managing director and share their ideas and thoughts. That's the kind of environment that attract them and allow them to thrive and retain them for an optimal period. Not such a long time. Each time people talk about retention, I smile, because this is not a generation that is out there to do retention with you. Sorry, that's not the way they are cut out. It doesn't work for them. Thank you.
Beautiful. In fact, this thing you said, the last thing you said, WA, reminded me of a conversation I had some months back where I was teasing, you know, some members of the team, and they were making comments about some other person that had spent maybe about 10 years. And you could see the look of whether it's shock or amusement on their faces, like 10 years in the same company. So I asked them a question. I said, okay, what will it take to keep you here for 10 years? And if you see the way they all screamed, you know, that, they couldn't even fathom it. So I said, okay, what would be your reasons for leaving an organization that has done this, done that, done this? And they just said, we can't answer you very well, but it will take a lot. You could see them struggling to articulate what will keep them. One of them now said something like, well, it's not like I want to stay with the company, but I want to explore more. I want to see more. So to your point about employers who say retention, there has to be a different thought process around retention, as it were, because of these categories of people. The initial question I wanted to ask is something I think I was going to ask FA. So I'm going to continue with WA actually. The initial question I was going to ask her was, you know, along what are the modern trends? But I think WA has done a good job of opening the door on modern trends or things that organizations can do differently to attract, build trust. He mentioned that the generation now want to be able to come up to the most senior people in the organization and speak freely and share ideas and have that sense of, you know, openness and freedom. So my question to WA again, continuously, will be, some organizations are fixated on hiring talent with some level of job experience. And this could sometimes sideline millennials and Generation Z. You see a lot of job JDs that says 15 years experience, 20, 25 years or 5, 10 years experience. Is a shift in mindset required? That's the first part of the question. What changes, if any, would you suggest? Because we're expecting that a lot of people are in this session, a mix of people, managers, hiring managers, and some business owners. Would you suggest, you know, if any, would you suggest should be incorporated in the hiring process of organizations? So what shift in mindset do we require? And what are the things that you believe organizations should start looking at differently? That's a question for you, WA.
Thank you very much. Before the network throws me out, let me just say the first shift in mindset we need is to stop defining experience by years. Experience should be defined by the competencies that you want people to bring to the job. There are some jobs that definitely will require some competencies for people to take off. The second shift in mindset is experiences do not necessarily come only from work environments. Experiences can come from social settings and family environment as well. So that's why the focus should be on competencies, not defining work for so many years or the kind of job that must have been done for so many years. The third shift in mindset that we need is we should start thinking of sourcing competencies internally. So you want younger generation, then you should be able to provide the competencies to them internally. I always cite the example of the military to most of my colleagues. You never see the military advertise for the position of a lieutenant or second lieutenant or a warrant officer. It's simply because the competencies are domiciled within and they are able to provide it to fresh, brilliant, able, and strong young people. So we need to shift our thinking from these poaching caps that we wear to how do we domesticate, the provision of competencies within our organizations. So some organizations do it well, they promote from within, and some are on the journey, to do it and do it well as well. So that experiences we talk about here will be more of how many projects or how many battles you've won, how many territories you've conquered, and those will be competencies rather than years of experience or you must have worked as this and that. People work as any title and they still come out of it with little or no competencies gained or acquired in those periods. So that is key for all of us that want to attract and retain young generation Y and Z to thrive in our organizations. Thank you.
You see why I say I have to go back and watch this session because it's just the nuggets are dropping per second. So I hear you where you said, stop defining experience by the years, but rather competencies. A lot of people will not apply for some jobs. Meanwhile, they've gained some competency one way or the other and should be given an opportunity. Second point you mentioned is experiences do not only come from work environments. Sometimes some people are opportune to have, been exposed in their family or they've done something in their social environment. And lastly, competencies are domiciled within, and we need to sometimes look within to push people to grow. Fantastic nuggets. Thank you very much. So we're in our fourth and last category of questions, which basically covers how do we bridge the gap across generations. So we've spoken in the beginning about identifying the different generations in the workplace. We've gone into, okay, what are the benefits these two specific, generation Y and Z, what do they bring to the workplace? How can we leverage on their skill set? What are the skills or the advantages they bring forward, and how can we harness it? So basically, what are the things we can do to bridge the gap? Because you've mentioned, both of you have mentioned in your submissions that there are differences, there are some gaps. How do we bridge the gap? And the first question will go to FA. What is your advice to the older generation? Remember, you at first told us young shall grow and the old will go. I'm holding on to that one, FA. What is your advice to the older generation? How can baby boomers and Generation X stay relevant within their organizations?
Thank you very much. Again, it's important to know that these generations are, yes, we said one will go and one will grow, but they're not parallel lines that must not meet. And, so we need to, first of all, get that myth out of our heads that, is either or, you either bring the millennials in and get the gen X out. No, it's rather a complementary environment where there's all the strengths come to the table, and you harness all the strengths for the, if you like, for the best opportunities that the organization can give itself. So what is it that we can do differently to ensure that both, all generations, bring their best to the workplace? I think first and foremost, we must build an organizational culture or a societal culture that is generationally aware. In other words, we must all, we must have an environment either as an organization or as a nation where we know that we exist in multiple generations, and we must ensure that we take relevance of each generation. So first of all, there must be that awareness, and then we must ensure that we understand like what we're doing now is unpacking the generational nuances, generational characteristics. Management must take ownership either at the societal or organizational level of understanding the generational nuances, generational characteristics, and you must be dedicated and committed to diversity and inclusion. So diversity and inclusion is a management initiative or a management strategy that is required to ensure that we get the best of multiple generations, or we get the best of anything that's different, and we bring inclusion into it. So I'm of the view that there must be deliberateness around building your D&I agenda. The diversity and inclusion agenda, as far as age is concerned, must be deliberate. Organizations like, Standard Bank Group, where I'm in, Standard Bank Group is over 170 years. And there are families where the grandfather, the father, the son have worked in the Standard Bank environment. So organizationally, it is generationally ready. It's ready to produce multiple generations. So we must have a diversity and inclusion framework, a diversity and inclusion strategy that makes it very crystal clear at all touch points of the employee experience. How are we going to ensure we have multiple generations in place? Mr. President, talked about how not to focus your JDs on the number of years of experience, but on the critical experiences you need to bring to the table. And at the same time, how do you shift or ensure that your talent acquisition strategies is a mix of build, buy, and borrow? In other words, you are not essentially just buying. So for all the critical skills, in other words, all the key roles that are required to drive the organization, such as key roles required to drive the business, such as a finance person, the CFO, all the C-suite roles. How do you ensure that there's diversity in the placement of those C-suite roles? We talked at the beginning with the poll, and interestingly, I saw that some people thought, no, we shouldn't, I can't trust a millennial with a managerial position. And I'm wondering, what are we talking about? We should ensure that the millennials have a seat, that your C-suite is diversity friendly. The mix is even in your C-suite. All your C-suite officers, chief operating officer, chief financial officer, you must have a mix of Gen X, Gen Y. Why? Because that is the logic of the build, buy, and borrow. For some of them, you buy from outside, you just go and hire. Build means that the people must be growing from within. And what's the value of build? Build means that the older generation have the opportunity to pass on their knowledge to the younger generation. So you hand over institutional knowledge, institutional history, and that which enables the institution continue into the future. So it must be a mix of build, buy, and borrow. The emphasis on build is to ensure that there's that generational succession taking place, and to ensure that you get the best of both parties. The older generation gets to equip and gets to, pass on knowledge and pass on the competences onto the younger generation. Means you must have a deliberate diversity and inclusion strategy and framework in place. And there must be related initiatives populated in this your framework, i.e. there must be coaching, mentoring programs in place. So the older should mentor the younger. Again, there must be reverse mentoring, the younger to also mentor the older, so that you can sense, WA said, look, my son gets to do some things for me. Even my 7-year-old, 8-year-old son gets to do certain things for me. I mean, I have this work chair and this economic chair that, I suddenly thought the hand was falling off and I was going bananas. I said, oh my God, the hand is falling off. My son said, no, it can be fixed, mommy. I'll handle it. And he was fixing it. And I was just looking at him. This is me trying to figure out how to fix an economic chair. And he said, no, mommy. And he tells me there's a logical way. There's a logical way to fix it. This is an 8-year-old. Mommy, there's a logical way to fix it. I'll handle it. Just give me a break. And he's taking it over. His mind is in the default mode. So there must be initiatives in your framework that enables both generations to learn from one another. Structured mentoring, top down, reverse mentoring, bottom up. Organizations that take on a digital transformation agenda will typically look for the digital natives and assign them to the older ones and say, so you are the mentor for Funke Amobi. You are the younger one. So I'm looking for you because I'm like, you know what? I need to learn and I need to learn fast. So I'm looking for those who did not even need to learn. They were almost like by default already learned because they were born in a digital age. They look at their phones averagely. They look at their phones 10 times in an average of 10 minutes. So it's almost like, glancing at it for nothing. So essentially, they're already informed. They know what the phone can do and what the tablet cannot do for them. It's known because they figured it out by all the glances that they've had at it. So when you need somebody else to learn, you need to ensure that you put in place deliberate strategies, a deliberate D&I strategy and deliberate initiatives such as mentoring, reverse mentoring, to ensure that the continuous learning from one another and enabling all these generations to work together in the workplace or in the nation happen. It can only happen riding on deliberate initiatives and a deliberate framework or strategy.
Yes, thank you very much. Fantastic. This is actually a boot camp where we're just putting everything together. Deliberate strategies, deliberate initiatives. I remember I heard the word reverse mentoring about maybe 5 years ago, and it blew my mind because it requires a deliberate mindset, a mind shift and a mindset that is approachable, that says, okay, can I learn from the younger generation? Because there's so much you can learn. You are mentoring them in terms of maybe some skills they need in being able to manage people and all of that, but they also are teaching you. You use your example of your son, same thing with WA, and the same thing I'm sure with most people that have children. You see that they're teaching you something, they're telling you how to tweak something. I remember I was on Zoom one other day, I was frustrated with something. I didn't know my daughter had snuck up behind my back and pointed and said, that is it. Like, can't you see it's right there? It's right there. And but that's their generation, and we have to accept the generation as it were. So the last question, I think it's just one question I'll take from our own list before we go into questions from, and I'm already seeing fantastic, interesting questions. So the last question will be for WA. And it's because the other one would have asked, FA has touched on it. What key professional traits should the Generation Z and Millennials, this for me, I love this question particularly, seek to acquire in order to stay relevant to their respective careers? So we've said they're fantastic, they bring a lot to the table, the digital age, they're, digital natives and all of that. But what key professional traits? Because a lot of times I hear people complain. That's one of the things that I've struggled with, many years back. And I keep saying, no, they're not this bad. We need to work better. We can work better. A lot of people are just saying, I can't work with millennials. They're badly behaved. Some people say things like lazy youths. I'm sure we remember that. I won't call the person's name. We've used different names to categorize people, but some of us that have been fortunate to work in environments see that there's a lot that they bring to the table. So, but WA, what would you say are key professional traits that these set of persons in the workplace that they should acquire in order to actually still stay relevant in their respective careers? WA. Okay. I'm not
Sorry,
sure.
my apology. I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. So if I understand your question correctly, because it wasn't quite clear landing. So it's like, what counsel do I want to give to the Gen Y and Gen Z regarding professional traits?
Yes.
For them to
what key traits?
For them to be embraced.
What key professional traits should they have? Should they acquire to remain relevant?
Okay.
To remain relevant in their own respective careers. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, first of all, let me make it clear that they are relevant. I think the challenge is, like you described earlier, it is with being accepted by the other generations that have different outlook and perspective as to what should be happening in the work environment. So what then should the Gen Y and Gen Z exhibit as professional traits to make them acceptable so that they remain relevant? And this is not this advice is not just for them. It's also for the other generations as well. And I think FA alluded to that earlier on when she talked about the culture of awareness in our workplaces, for people to know that they are not the only generation existing in the workplace. And one size will not fit all. So the first thing is for everyone to recognize that and understand that their perception, their approach, their nuances will differ from generation to generation. But at the end of the day, and this is the key, there is always the meeting point where the preference of one generation will be supportive of the preference of the other. I give you an example. Baby boomers, they love to mentor. Those of us that have retirees in our families, we know what it means to visit them. Every time you visit them is an opportunity for 1 point lesson. They love to mentor you on everything. And for the Gen Z, very interesting. They too love to be mentored. Each time I visit my in-laws or my dad with my son, I always keep my eyes on my watch. Dad, I'm leaving now, I have a meeting. And my son will be persuading me, hold on, Dad, I want to talk to Grandpa. So there is a way you can, that's in the family setting, even in the workplaces. And that is why you have it, that the Gen Z will prefer to go and talk to your boss's boss. It's not because they have no respect for hierarchy. It's just because they love to be mentored. And we in the Gen X, most of the time, our focus is on, oh, you have to be independent, just like I am. You have to be innovative. This should be a problem you can solve. You don't need to bring it to me. Or you bring the problem to me, come with 2 solutions, and so on and so forth. So the Gen Z and the Gen Y should recognize the fact that those of us in Gen X and those baby boomers are different in the way they look at things. But those differences can complement one another. All they need to do is engage, discuss, understand the preferences of the other generations. They don't need to change who they are. It's just for them to now take advantage of that opportunity to get their generation to understand them as well, what they prefer and why they prefer them. So at the end of the day, there will be the handshake that will make the work environment more conducive and more productive for everyone. It's about having the awareness and engaging to have understanding, to flex a few areas that could be flexed so that there is a handshake that ensures optimum relationship and culture that drives performance. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. So awareness and key understanding, which is why I think this is not even thing. I know for a fact that this webinar has answered a lot of questions that many people have had. Why do people act a certain way? Why don't people get along? Why do people just assume that there's something wrong with this generation and the other? So if you have this keen awareness, you understand why they act that certain way, then you're able to engage better. So thank you very much for your responses so for now. we have questions that have been sent in by our, audience or attendees, and I'll take them one after the other. In my head, I've allotted them to different persons. So maybe the first one will go to FA. So the question says, how should the older generation function in the new generation? Should they give up already because they cannot keep up with what characterizes the Gen Y and the Gen Z? FA, did you hear my question?
I think I did. So
okay,
should
I'll take it again.
Younger generation give up? Please give.
So how should the older generation function? They say in the new generation, but I guess in this new era, that's what the question is. Should they just give up already because they can't keep up with what characterizes the Gen Y and Gen Z? So we've said Gen Y and Gen Z, they're digital, they're faster, they're moving. Should older generation, the baby boomers, Gen X, should they just go already? Should they give up, or what should they do to try and function in this jet age? That's the question.
It's like answering the question, should we give up on our children because they've come and they are so different from us? Should we just give up? So the give up is not even an option. It's a no, it's not an option. So the older generation, first of all, need to come to terms. It's simply like change management. To manage change effectively, you first of all need to come out of denial. Secondly, you need to embrace it with a sense of urgency. You need to let yourself know that the iceberg is melting. I've got to move. You need to know that you need to move away from who moved my cheese to the cheese has moved. I'm going to look for a different cheese. So the older generation, we need to first of all come out of denial and accept that there is a point of difference in this new generation. There are people that still say, and my heart bleeds when I hear it in my generation, there are people that still say, what do you mean by millennials or Gen Y or Gen Z? Please, what Gen Z? They're the same thing. What my mother did to me, I will do to my son. It doesn't work that way. How my parents brought me up, I will bring up my children. It cannot work that way. So it's first of all coming out of denial, embracing the change, knowing that the cheese has moved, knowing that this different generation is different and it has come to stay, and the point of difference will only continue rather than, vanish. It's only going to continue. When we get to that sense of urgency, then we ourselves can begin to condition ourselves to embrace the change. And what does it mean to embrace the change? We must understand the millennial. First of all, ask ourselves, who are these people? Understand this generation. When we understand the generation, then we need to focus on how can we help this generation get the best from us. So we should reverse it to say, how can I help this generation get the best from me? How can I leverage on their strengths to bring out the best in them? How can I enable them get the best from me? And how can both of us, i.e. their generation and ours, come to the table, bring in the best versions of ourselves? A millennial can never be me because my generation is my generation. When I looked at, some of the things that happened in the last few weeks in Nigeria, it dawned on me the more I'm not a millennial. It was clear to me that, look, this is clearly a generational, when you say a generation that lives in the social media, a generation that expresses themselves in that manner. So you need to, first of all, understand the generation. In understanding the generation, you begin to figure out, how can I leverage on the strengths of this generation? We say they're independent, they're entrepreneurial, they're, I don't want to use the word restless, but we say they're constantly on the go. So how do I leverage on that and make sure that they are responsible for innovation? I support them to get to markets, but they should go innovate. And then I bring my own skill of market knowledge and market followership to help them get to market. So it's first of all, we getting out of denial and we understanding them, and then knowing how we can bring our own strengths to support them and leverage on their strengths, and then all of us bring the best versions of ourselves into the organization.
Oh, fantastic. So I'll take just one more question from the one sent in, because we are running short out of time. I guess everybody needs to move. This question I'll send to WA, and I like the question because I was still talking about it this morning, something around entitlement mentality. So WA, I hope you can hear me. Someone says Gen Z are said to have entitlement mentality. Is this a good mentality to have, or should such mentality be corrected? Does this mentality help in the workplace at all? Please, I need your response. Try to summarize, but it's one of my best questions. So let's dissect it. Thank you very much.
What I would say is, like FA said earlier on, our role is to ensure that we help this generation Y and Z to get the best out of us and out of themselves. Entitlement mentality must be clarified for it to be categorized as good or bad. So it could be positive if it is about demanding what you deserve. An example, somebody does not get peer review in the workplace, and if she's doing a great job, such people that walk up to their line managers or HR to talk about it are the ones that are remembered in some organizations that are not well structured. And those who keep quiet about it, when you keep quiet, your own will keep quiet with you, if you understand what I mean. It's painful. Can you hear me again? Can you hear me? Anyone there, can you hear me? Confirm if you can hear me.
We can hear you. We can hear you. It's the last part of your...
Quickly.
Yeah.
In that sense, when you have what you deserve. But when you assume that you deserve what you don't deserve, and that happens often as well, based on understanding of the circumstances, maybe you just take it for granted that you ought to get it. Then what we need to do is wear the cap of mentors and mentor and help them to understand. I have seen cases like that. And those are the cases that usually get a lot of attention, even from my own children. I've seen cases where they just take it for granted, dad will do this or mom will do that. And I think it's got to do with the level of our involvement in the affairs of the younger ones, parents. When I was going into secondary school, my parents did not follow me. They only asked me to follow somebody in the area that was going in the same direction. But this time around, we'll put them in our cars, we'll have lunch box. The network do this to me. This is the question I've waited for a whole day. How can the network do this? Oh, no.
Please continue.
Okay.
I can hear you.
Thank you very much. So we create, we go with lunch. We sit in the car from till late in the evening. We help them to check if their pencils are sharpened, their razors are in order, and so on and so on. I think because of what we went through, Gen X, we did not want our children to go through what we went through, but we go overboard to do more than we ought to do. We did not allow them to develop their models. They are for everything, and we call it entitlement mentality. Well, we share in responsibility, and we should help to cut the mess. But that has a side to it where younger people demand what they deserve. And we saw the example of what happened. All we could have done is help them with the rough edges, and they will have achieved even much more than already. Thank you very much.
Thank you, WA. So I've been told to take one more question out of the pool, and then that will round up most of the questions that we are asking, the panelists. So this question goes as follows. In identifying candidates for a C-suite role, how can one measure a candidate's fluency with engaging millennials and Gen Z employees? FA, please, both of you could take it, but let's start with FA. Basically, the question is saying, in identifying candidates for a C-suite role, how can one measure, how do you measure that candidate's fluency, that candidate's level of engagement, with engaging millennials and Gen Z employees? Is FA, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. And
Okay.
that's a very interesting question. I quite like it. Whoever sent it through, a very big well done to you. Your mind is in the mode already. So to be honest, I'll tell you, there are different ways. I know right or wrong hows. There are different ways you can achieve this. And I'll tell you what I would prefer. I would rather use an integrated case study approach. Okay? An integrated case study enables you test and assess many things at the same time. I'd rather use an integrated case study approach that tells the story of an organization that has a lot going on and that needs to, struggle in the marketplace to achieve or to see its essence, or an organization that needs to, and I'll paint a picture of what's going on in the macros, all of the, and then give the candidate an opportunity to make sense out of the myriad of issues and propose what top management's responsibility would be, or what he or she would do if appointed CEO of such an enterprise, and just keep it simple without being targeted and making it look like you're looking for a diversity answer. It's in the mix. Any individual who is diversity, who is D&I wired, would wear a D&I lens in every response, in every strategy that they bring to table. They will put on the lenses of D&I. They will say to you every time, they'll say, just yesterday we were talking about putting together an annual strategy session, and we're talking about attendees. And without even thinking, we're slicing and dicing and saying we must have some graduate trainees attend, we must have some these attend. It's just in the simple thinking. So this, because your C-suite, your CEO is the driver, is the leader of the C-suite. And driving a diversity and a diverse and an inclusive workforce that is ready for this generational, and who is responsive to this generation must be leader-led. And the CE must therefore be ready to drive that culture. And what's culture is the way we behave, is the way what we say and how we say it. So I would give a very simple scenario and ask the individual to respond. And I will see if in any of your strategic thinking, diversity and inclusion comes up in the simplest of ways. If you go asking targeted questions, what would you do to respond to millennials and Gen Z? You've lost it. I'm going to give you the answer you want to hear. In that assessment, you're going to get the answer you want to hear. You're going to get, I'm going to make sure that I meet every day with the millennials. I'm going to make sure that I put things in place that will attract them. No, you need to paint an everyday situation, the normalcy of today's business environment, and ask that individual to respond with cutting edge leading management priorities, and just wear and see if what lens did you wear? Did you wear the lens of values, of ethics, of of diversity and inclusion, people, or was it just, look, I'm going to the market, technology, I'm going into market, I'm going to deliver value, I'm going to move the numbers. How are you going to move the numbers? Through people. How? Through people. If you have to ask several questions and before you get the person to layer it and unpack it onto generational appreciation of talent, then that's not the proficiency level you want for D&I. It doesn't mean that that's not your candidate. It just means that you need to help that person get to that level of, it means that person's readiness as far as D&I is concerned needs some further assistance. So I would elect to check it out in a very, very basic case study based manner, integrated, and the person just has to think through a normal situation, and I'll just figure out whether you would wear your diversity and inclusion lenses. And if you wear it, it will be the easiest of your answers. So it's not a big deal. Don't go asking questions around, oh, if I gave you a pack of millennials, you're going to get the answers that you want to hear, and you're going to get textbook answers. You should attempt to assess proficiencies in, competencies like D&I, in a very, very natural context and frame, and enable the individual, just default into their ready mode. And then you'll be able to, get a better sense of how the individual is wired.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Fantastic response. I don't know if WA has anything else to add on top of that particular question that was just asked.
I like the case study approach, and I typed into the Q&A room, additional steps I would take. We have redefined interviews. Interview tends to be people that are more senior to the position interviewing the candidates. What we do now is we involve the team that will work with that individual in the interview process. So I will put together a conversation team, and I will select the most outspoken of my Gen Z and Gen Y, to engage the candidate. And they will have a conversation, because interviews these days just
okay.
Conversations. They are not panel sessions that's looking for your mistake. It's more of interaction and conversation to know the way that individual thinks, and the style of Gen Z and Y, maybe like some cups of tea.
Okay. I think we got a hang of most of what we were trying to say. WA, your network has gone off again. Can everybody else hear me? Okay, so we actually have pushed. In fact, everybody has just been sending questions. We can't take all the questions at this session. We have to do part 2 of this particular topic.
I made the point, I guess. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We will most likely have to do a part 2 of this wonderful topic. Everybody is raving about it already. So final thoughts, final comments to most of the people who are on this session. What will you want people to take away from this session? I think we've repeated a lot of what but final thoughts. So Effie, please go first.
Thanks very much, Kemi, and thank you. It's been a very engaging session. So it's estimated that Nigeria will have the 4th largest millennial population by the year 2030. The 4th largest in the world by the year 2030, which is already less than 10 years to go. By 2025, it's also estimated that majority of the workforce will be Gen Z and millennials. So what does that mean? It means that this is our reality. And it means that this is a reality we cannot. It means that it's a reality that if you ignore it to your own detriment. Your own detriment, the detriment of our organizations, and the detriment of our nation. So I take a view that readiness management, we all need to begin to embrace this generational reality. And we need to begin to take a deliberate look at how ready is my organization for this 2030, if you like, forecast. If we're going to have the largest population of millennials in the workforce across the world, the 4th largest, how ready is my organization? I would like to invite all organizations to begin to take a look at their readiness index. What's your readiness index as far as embracing millennials and Gen Z is? What is your culture like? Is your culture generationally friendly to the millennials and the Gen Z? Culture is a very big fabric of an organization, of the institution. So start from the culture. What other systems are inimical to our engaging and embracing these generations and ensuring that our organizations are going to be vantagely positioned by the year 2030, 2025, 2030 around the corner. What do we need to begin to deliberate? What structures do we need to deliberately put in place to align with the nuances? And I go back to our engagement drivers. How can we redefine our employee engagement drivers to be millennial friendly, to be Gen Z friendly? How can we begin to think about those, we talk about technology in the workplace, meaningfulness of work, entrepreneurial opportunities, all in the workplace. How can we begin to go back to those fundamental building blocks of engaging the millennial mindset and ensuring that we begin to put this in place in our respective organizations? If we talk about technology in the workplace, how technologically enabled, how much investment are you putting as an organization into technology infrastructure? Because this is clearly an attractor, if you like, attracting agent for these generations. So it's about how do we deliberately put these building blocks in place, creating meaningful work opportunities, giving them the entrepreneurial opportunity and spirit at work. How do we ensure that our readiness index to embrace this generation in our respective workforce and in the nation at large continues to go on the upward trajectory? I think that this should be the biggest takeout from a session like this. Readiness Index. Do that assessment of do a self-assessment. To thyself be true, to your organization be true, and put the mirror and say, are we millennial friendly? Are we Gen Z friendly? And are we committed to moving our bar on the Readiness Index? I think this would be a good place to start for many, professionals and individuals who have taken time to attend this session today. A good place to start would be to begin to implement the key insights from here by assessing your readiness to embrace these generations. Thank you.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful submission. Readiness Index. Are we able to assess our readiness index on the Gen Zs, the millennials in our environment, in our workplaces? How ready are we actually based on most of the talking points we've gone through in this session? I think WA mentioned that he's having some network problems, but let's see. WA, are you able to give your closing remarks? It would be awesome to hear your voice. Yes.
I was trying to type it into the chat room. But let me just say one word. Okay. Organizations should engage Gen Y and Z HR leaders to help them chart their D&I strategy and ensure that they are future ready. When you have those who understand that workforce in charge of the HR processes and strategies for their organizations, it will be easier to ensure that the appropriate strategy that will address the entire gamut of generational divides that you have in the business will be covered. The more you have people like us who are going, yes, you have opportunity to bring in those who are growing to help their generation grow. And I mean it, it's not a joke. So that's what I'm trying to drive in Flamios. I thought I was very young, but with HENSA's protest, I realized we need the younger folks to begin to take over from us. And so we're looking at people like Kemi and others to take over from this far that God had helped us to take leadership of HR in Nigeria. Thank you, FA. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. President. Kemi, we can't hear you. You're mute.
Apologies. It's wrong here. Can you hear me now? Yes. Thank you very much for that submission. Thank you. And yes, so closing remarks from both of you. Readiness Index, assess your readiness index from FA. And WA basically is saying you need to engage Generation Y and Z, even as your HR leaders. As some people are getting ready to go, you need to start growing. These are the people that we assess, your levels of engagement and understand the beauty or the differences that each of these generations bring to the workforce. I think for me, closing remarks will be that this has been a fantastic session. A lot of times, you know, as HR practitioners, you're just focused on getting work done, you're getting people to be productive, to deliver and all of that. But if anything I have taken out of 2020 will be that we need to leverage on our unique differences, even with our demographics. And like both of you have rightly mentioned, I've been in different conversations the past 2 weeks over the NSAS campaign, Sorosoke generation. And if anything, you see that there is a difference in approach, there's a difference in strategy, there's a difference in energy, there's a difference in movement. Maybe in retrospect, some people could have done things differently, but I tell you, these are the generation, or this is the generation that we need to now build up on, empower, and also learn from and improve, you know, on, and vice versa. So I think someone says there's a raised hand. I don't know. Okay, so I'm done from my end. Nike, over to you. I think it's Nike or yes. So thank you very much, FA and WA. This is KS reporting live.
Thank you very much, Kemi. Thank you. Wow, that was a very enlightening, educative, and insightful session. And we'll say a very big thank you to our moderator and panelists for their time and sharing their insights with us today. We also thank each one of you for being a very fantastic audience. For the benefits of participants that do not know what we do at DCSL, we provide governance services, trainings for directors and senior management. We provide business advisory and regulatory compliance services, company sectorial support to public and private companies, as well as SMEs. We assist with executive talent recruitment and director selection. We conduct surveys and researches, and also provide regulatory and statutory compliance services. Upcoming webinars is being projected now on your screen. We look forward to having you again at our webinars. It's been projected, yes, on artificial intelligence. We have something on immigration, business review, business outlook as well. Please follow us on our social media handles for details of our forthcoming events. We're on Instagram, we're on YouTube, and we're on LinkedIn. Link to the recording for today's session will be circulated to participants. You may, however, visit our YouTube page at DCSL Nigeria to watch at any time. We look forward to welcoming you all again at our future events and wish you a pleasant weekend ahead. Thank you, everyone. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.